In the previous weeks, we looked at the different phases in the software development lifecycle, right? Starting from the requirements, then we looked at how we can design our software system, what are various development tools like frameworks, IDEs, debugging tools, code analysis tools. And then we also looked at testing, right? How we can test our application. And we looked at different levels of testing, starting from unit tests to testing the entire software system. Now, the focus of this week is to understand how we can deploy and monitor our software system. So what do we mean by deployment? So deployment means that the software system which we have built, it has to be easily accessible to users of the system. All right. So let's say you're building a web application and this has to be hosted on a server somewhere which the end users can access via a URL. Right. So in this week, we'll look at ways in which we can deploy a software application. We will also look at monitoring. So what do we mean by monitoring? So how we can capture and analyze the application's execution information, right? So how are users using it? There might be some performance issues, there might be other errors, timeouts, etc. And hence monitoring is necessary once our system has been deployed. So now how do we go about deploying our software system, right? So before we look at what are the different ways in which we can deploy our system, we need to understand that the software is executed, right, in what is known as an environment, right? So what is an environment? An environment is a system or maybe a set of systems that execute a given software application, right? So as developers, we write code, we test the code, and finally this environment builds the code, right? Creates an executable, right, which users and other people can access. So what are these different environments? So there are different types of environments. We will look at what is a development environment. Then there is a testing environment, a staging environment, and a production environment. So whenever a team develops or writes code, usually these type of environments are available. All need not be available, but at least the development, testing, and production are usually available when we write or when we build systems, software systems. So let's look at these types of environments in detail. Right? So what is a development environment? The development environment is nothing but the local environment of a software developer, right? The software developer writes his or her code in the development environment in their local machine, right, which can contain an IDE and other tools which the individual developer uses, right? So in the development environment, the individual user writes his or her code, then tests it, and then builds the entire code base to check if the system is compiling and working, right? And then what they do is then they commit this code to the shared code base, right? It might be a version control system which maintains this code base, and this code base is known as the mainline or the master branch, right? And the developer's code base is known as the working copy, right? And once a developer commits his or her code, right, they also need to check whether my working copy does not clash or if there aren't any conflicts with the code base of other developers, right? And if there are some clashes or conflicts, then these have to be fixed. And also the development environment is connected to the local database, right? So you can access the database, or you can read and write to the database without worrying how it will affect the real data in the software, right? So the real software system might be deployed somewhere else, but you are testing or writing code which access the local database. So this was regarding the development environment, right? So now that you have written your code, you have done unit testing, and the code in the code repository is then placed in what is known as a testing environment, right? So what is a testing environment? It is in this testing environment where integration testing and system testing is done, right? So if some tests fail, right, the code with the defect is removed from the test environment, and the appropriate module in which the failure has occurred is identified. And not only that, the person concerned with developing that module is identified and notified, right? And also what is done is the code is rolled back to the previous working version, right? And the developer responsible for that module fixes the code in his or her own working copy and then commits it to the shared code base, right? And so the error is fixed, and then it is sent to the testing environment in the next scheduled deployment. So this was regarding the testing environment. So now that our code has been tested thoroughly, can we deploy it to a server and release it to users? Well, this environment, the actual environment where users will access our software system, that is known as the production environment, right? And usually before sending it or deploying it to the production environment, the code is deployed into what is known as the staging environment, right? And this staging environment is known as the pre-production environment, and it exactly resembles the production environment, right? In terms of hardware, software, configurations, all of that, right? And it runs on a remote machine, right? Not on a local system in the network in which the development team is, but it runs on a remote machine. So now you might be thinking, why do we need a staging environment, right? Why not directly push the code into the production environment, the live environment? So learners, here is a reflection spot for you, right? So reflect on, why do we actually need a staging environment? Now, what are the advantages of having a staging environment? You can pause this video and think about your responses before proceeding. So why do we need a staging environment, or why is it beneficial to have a staging environment, right? So the main reason is deploying a software system, right? It involves a lot of activities and configurations, right? We need to install libraries, packages, configure them, maybe run scripts like initializing the database, right? And even if, let's say, our system is deployed, and let's say if we want to update certain modules, or if you want to add new features into this live application, right? if all of this is done directly into the production environment, and if something goes wrong, right, the live system can crash and this can affect users, right? So hence, before deploying, we test the system in the staging environment to see if the installation and updates and everything is working fine. And since the staging environment is a replication of the production environment, we can then replicate what we have done in the staging environment in the production environment. Another reason is the staging environment can be the place where new features can be previewed, maybe to management, maybe to different sales or marketing teams, or maybe even to potential clients, right? If the client wants to see a new feature, but you don't want to roll it out to everyone, but just to a few select people, then we can show it in the staging environment. And another reason is that performance testing or stress testing, this cannot be done locally on our local systems or the testing environment, right? It has to be done in the live environment, right? And if it is done in production, it can unnecessarily affect users who are using the system, right? And that's the reason why the staging environment is a good place where we can do performance and stress testing as well. And then finally, we have the production environment, right? It is also known as the live environment, and users can directly interact, or the software is housed in the production environment and available to all users. Now, let's say we have successfully deployed our application to the production environment, right? And the application is working. Now, let's say that the client has requested for a new feature, right? Maybe it can be a new user interface or a completely new feature, right? And now what does the team do? We go through the entire software lifecycle, one iteration, right? We design and then we do some development, right? So individual developers in their own working copy, they modify the code, test it, and then commit it to the shared code base. And then it goes to the testing, the staging, and the production environment. Now, one thing we have to be careful of is that this code from the staging environment has to be deployed into the production environment, right? And in the production environment is the actual software system which users are using, right? And hence we have to follow some strategy so that this transfer of the system from the staging to the production environment is done smoothly, right? And these are known as different deployment strategies, right? So ways in which we can push code from staging to production, right? And we will look at some of these strategies in this video. One such strategy is known as the staged deployment or the blue-green deployment strategy. And what we do is that we create a new separate production environment for the new version, right? Without affecting the current one, right? So let's say that the blue system, right, shown in the figure, that is the live production environment. And the new feature or the next iteration or the next version of the product is deployed to the green environment shown in the picture, right? Now, after sufficient integration testing and other types of testing is done, users are routed from the blue environment to the green environment, right? So a router takes care that all the users are now rerouted to the new production environment, which is the green environment, right? And now all the incoming requests go to the green environment and the blue environment is idle, right? And now what is the advantage of this model? One key advantage is that rollback is easy, right? So let's say something wrong happens, or there is some error, or the system crashes due to some error. Now we can easily reroute users back to the blue environment because the blue environment was working, right? So this is one key advantage of the blue-green deployment strategy. Now let's say that the green environment is currently the live environment, right? And now we want to make a new update, right? So for the next update, we push the new update from the staging to this blue environment, right? And then we make a switch, right? So in this way, the blue and the green environment are regularly cycling between the real and the previous versions. Now the next deployment strategy is known as the Canary deployment, or the phased rollout or incremental rollout, right? So in this strategy, we slowly roll out the changes to a small subset of users, right? And this is similar to the blue-green deployment strategy, but now instead of deploying the new version to all users, right, in one go, we incrementally deploy it to a few subset of users, right? Now, how do we select which users to send it to? So one way to do it is to either do it randomly or based on user profiles or demographics, or maybe even for, let's say, geographically distributed users, right? Let's say there are multiple servers in different locations. We might roll out to a particular region first, right? And we see if it is working properly there, and then we roll it out incrementally to other places as well. So one drawback of this deployment strategy is that we have to manage multiple instances at once, right? We have to manage the old version and the new version as well, because some users are using the previous version, other users are using the new version, right? And hence we have to manage multiple instances at once. Another type of deployment strategy is the version deployment strategy, right? And here we allow users to choose which version to use, right? We keep all versions alive and we let users choose which version they want, right? So this is commonly used in mobile applications, right? Let's say we are using an application like Paytm, Instagram, etc., and we receive a notification to update our app, right? And if the user updates, the deployment strategy is to route them to the new version. If not, they remain in the previous version, right? And again, the drawback of this is we have to maintain multiple versions, right? We have to, and let's say there are multiple updates and all users might not periodically update to the latest version, right? And that's why software companies, they usually specify that from up to this date, this following versions are supported. After that, we will stop giving support to those versions, right? So that is what is known as the version deployment strategy. So to summarize, in this video, we looked at several deployment environments, starting from the local, the testing, staging, and production. And we also looked at various deployment strategies, how we can deploy new versions of our application from the staging to the production, right? We looked at the blue-green strategy, the Canary strategy, and the version strategy. We looked at advantages and disadvantages of each of them.